Hey guys, doing something a little bit different here today. We're in my classroom working on actually the school's vehicle, this 2008 Hummer. It's a H3, and complaint with it is a misfire, running problem. And my only apologies right now is that I didn't film this part live. I did this morning with my class, and they're actually at lunch right now, and I wanted to get you guys up to speed with where we are, and I really wanted you to feel part of my class with me today. We definitely do things different here at Rosedale Tech. I don't know any other school that's doing live work, and what I like to do is I like to keep it interesting for myself, and to do that, I'll bring live cars into the room, and we'll break up our normal theory situation, and we will do theory over a live vehicle. We pick direction, we pick tests that we've learned, and it makes it a lot of fun for everyone. So I want to get you guys up to speed with where we are, and then we'll see where this takes us. Something to mention where we started with this is I started the vehicle on the other side of the shop and pulled it into the room, and in the process of moving it, what I noticed is it misfired a few times while it was cold and popped through the intake, and then it seemed to smooth out and run okay. So we brought it in the room, hooked the scan tool up, and of course the first thing we do is we display codes. And now I have a code in here that was not there before. When we started, we didn't have any indication at all. It said no codes present. Now we have a P0300 engine misfire detected. That was the direction we chose to go, was towards a misfire, because I felt a misfire. And without knowing much about this vehicle, we looked for some help. We have another guy that works at the school. His suggestion was mechanical, because this engine is known for mechanical problems. He worked at GM, so he would know that. So that's on our mind, mechanical issues. And really, we're looking for help. No codes were present, and so what we did is we went back to our troubleshooter, and we went to our engine, of course, and we went under code tips, and I actually picked our P0300 code, and I picked that code because I felt a misfire, but we didn't have any other direction and where to go. And what I was looking for is there a common problem on this car that maybe the troubleshooter can help me with, without searching on the internet or going on Google or Mitchell and looking at bulletins. And so I clicked on P0300, and this is what we found together as a class. And really we're focused on this middle paragraph. It says, text in the field report a P0300, which now you see we have. So before this was a maybe we have this fault, maybe we don't. But this P0300 being set by loss of compression due to leaking intake valve. Perform compression leak down tests. If testing reveals leaking intake valve, factory is recommending replacing the cylinder head with one having harder valve seats. So apparently there's a valve seat issue with this engine. Great information. I mean, you talk about a plug for Snap-on here. If you're working in the field, you're not familiar with this vehicle, how valuable is this information? Now I realize there's a bulletin here listed and we could find this info elsewhere. But if you're working somewhere where you're not connected to the internet and you're working on a vehicle at somebody's garage or in someone's driveway, this is great information. So right away we're worried about valve issues based on this. And it says also, let's see, install new intake and exhaust valve, see bulletin for info on updated valve springs and seats. Factory recommends using all new valve springs and seats. So that's pretty cool. And then we looked underneath. Another P0300 misfire may be due, accompanied with two other codes, may be due to a cam phaser. Let me just read it. Text in the field report screen in the solenoid for the cam phaser, I'm right here, become dislodged, causing camshaft to stay fully advanced or retarded. Engine may have low oil pressure related noises. Remove the solenoid, inspect for having 3 screens. If missing a screen, replace the solenoid, change the oil and filter. So again, talking about some awesome information here. We had 2 things right away we were looking at. And so what I did with my class is I wanted to teach them how to do a relative compression test. And we hadn't had the chance to do that in a theory situation yet. And I figured perfect time on this vehicle to verify compression is to do a relative compression test. And let's keep in mind here so we don't have to come back here, this firing order 13542. We're going to need that for later. So next place we went, go to our home tab and we go to our scope, and you see the test is still up here from before. I think what I'll do is I'll recreate this for you guys so you understand exactly what I'm doing. All right, so we're clear about the connections here and what I'm doing. I'm using an amp probe on the battery terminal, and I'm choosing battery negative. I'm going after this one right here because the jaws of my low amp probe will fit around it. Yes, I'm using a low amp probe. Setting it on a 60 amp scale, which is 10 millivolts. Every 10 millivolts will be 1 amp using this tool. Arrow points to direction of conventional theory current, so I'm going toward the battery on the negative. That's where I'm going to read starter current from. And then my second channel, I'm actually connected right to the number 1 coil control signal. This is a coil over plug design. It's a 3-wire coil. We have a power, a ground, and a signal. And so where I'm connected is the base circuit control signal. I have more information on this in a lot of the other videos that I've done. So what you guys can do is you can search relative compression testing. That would be one keyword you could search. You could search coil over plug. That would be another one where we could learn more about the coils. I have this information also on my premium channel. If you want to be part of my classroom and learn a lot more theory behind all of this, it's available on there too. So that's it. I'm grabbing starter current from here, I'm grabbing a sync signal from here. What this one's going to do is coordinate this channel. So all the impulses from here will be coordinated by this one, and I'll be able to tell which cylinder's which compression-wise over here using that. And now what we need to do to recreate this picture is we need to crank it. And what I'll do is hit stop. That is now live. And we need to do this with the engine cranking, so we need to disable ignition, disable fuel, use a clear flood mode, crank. One of the things we wouldn't want to do because we're using a second channel for ignition is to disable the ignition. I need the ignition to be here. So we held the pedal to the floor, TPS, wide open throttle during a crank. That is a clear flood mode condition, and that keeps the car from starting. Not all cars have it. This one does. Can you hold the pedal to the floor for me? And go ahead and crank that. Shut it off. Key on. Hold the pedal to the floor. Go ahead and crank it. Keep cranking. Keep cranking. All right, good. So that's our waveform. What we did from there, we zoomed out. And that's pretty close to what we saw. The green trace, we're not really looking for detail in this case. We're just looking for where number 1 cylinder is. That's our green trace is our number 1. Every time you see the green trace, that's the number 1. And then from there, we can plug in our firing order and figure out what's what up here. And this is pretty much what we saw as a group this morning. And really what we're looking for is something to stand out. And it's pretty tough to see, but I definitely see starting maybe from here. That one's low, and so is that one, so is this one, so is this one. And if you follow this, this is a 5-cylinder engine. And I don't, without looking at the bottom right now, just starting at this low one, count that as 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we consistently have a cylinder that's a little bit lower than the other ones. And this is what we saw this morning. Something else that I mentioned we can do with this test, and I have this in my other videos. Like I said, you guys can search some of these other ones. What we can do is use this signal for timing as well, and knowing that the transistor base turns off right there. Now I would want to use probably a better zoomed in view when doing timing measurements, but right at the point where that turns off is where spark occurs. And so you see that's lined right up with the top of that compression hump. What's making these humps is my amp probe. It's starter current, so we're clear. And what's creating these humps would be cylinder compression. As that engine turns and goes on its compression stroke, that starter encounters the same forces, and that's what causes the amperage to rise. So this is a voltage trace, but it's amperage. Remember the conversions. 10 millivolts is 1 amp. So 1 volt, do your math, is 100 amps. 1.4 volts would be 140 amps. So that's what we're looking at here. We're hovering between 100 and 140 amps. Not really that important. What's important is we see this low one here. And it's not super low, but it's definitely there. We can see it. And it's consistent. So we brought in the second channel to figure out which one that was. Again, that's where our firing order came in, 13542. We're connected to the number 1 with the green trace, and that puts this right here as my number 1. This is my number 3. This is my number 5. This is my number 4. This is my number 2. Back to number 1 again. So my low cylinder, which is that one. Let me bring my other cursors in. My low cylinder, which is this one right here, is the same as this one right here, is the number 4 cylinder. So we were able to identify which cylinder has low compression. It's not drastically low, but again, we're going in this direction from some tips from other people, worried about mechanical problems. That's why we started here. Pretty cool so far. We can identify the number 4 cylinder without pulling any spark plugs out of the vehicle and doing conventional compression testing. Not extremely important on this vehicle, but on other vehicles where, say, the intake manifold covers that cylinder, how important is it to know how to do this kind of test? Now, there's other ways we can synchronize coils. There will be differences down here depending on the ignition design. Again, all of that stuff I cover in my other videos. You can definitely see it better here. There's your low one. And it's every 5 cylinders we see that. So next thing we did, go to the scan tool again, and we started looking at our Misfire monitors. And I'll just go live for you first. Is your key still on? Yes. Go to my Misfire data, show you the ones I pulled up. It's already configured from last time. You see our history on cylinder 4. When we started here again, we were working more blind than we are now. I didn't have anything here at all. Let's graph this. And go ahead and start it. I think the graphs are a little bit easier to see what's going on. Can you snap that throttle once so we can change this RPM? All right, good. Just wanted to change my scales here a little bit. One more time, get a little bit higher RPM. Good. I heard a little pop right there. Not sure if the camera picked that up. Snap it again. Do it again. Hear the little pop through the intake. Do it again. Now, honestly, after listening to that, it actually sounds like the exhaust manifold may be leaking a little bit on here, and that could be misleading as far as that popping goes. That could be just from an air leak in the exhaust. Snap that again. Again. Yeah, there's an exhaust leak. That popping is not from the intake. That popping is from an exhaust leak that we have on this vehicle. So that's cool. I didn't know that before. But when we went in here, I thought it was really, really cool that what we could identify right away is cylinder 4 is really our one that's bad. If you look at cylinder 4 history now, we have 76, cylinder 4 current. You see those misfires occurring. When we started here, I want you guys to understand that we had no trouble code at all. The P0300 code was not there. And when we did our relative compression test, we did find that it was cylinder 4 that was a little bit lower than the other ones. And we thought it was really cool when we went in here under our misfire data that we found it was the number 4. As you can see, our current misfires on number 4 is the cylinder that's causing those misfires. Now we have a couple other ones. You see cylinder 1 has a couple, cylinder 2 has a couple, there's one on cylinder 5. But notice the history, which is really the recording of how long it's been misfiring. Number 4, I'm at 188 right now. And this number would be a lot higher. The problem was when we got this vehicle, somebody was in here and wiped out this memory. And here's the way we figured that out. If we go, well, I'm going to lose this scan data if I do that. I'll show that to you in a minute. Let's watch this a little bit longer first. The interesting part right now is like feeling this engine. I don't really feel a misfire. It does feel a little bit rough, but I don't feel a miss. But we're definitely picking up a miss on cylinder 4, especially on cylinder 4, and we are definitely seeing lower compression on that number 4. Something else we noticed. Go ahead and hold your RPM at 2,000 for me. Hold it there if you can. Pay attention to the current misfires at this higher RPM at 2100. Notice the misfires are now gone. When we see stuff like this, it suggests a mechanical problem. So again, we're back to a mechanical issue potentially. No misfires at 2000. Do it at 1500. I have my hand on the engine right now. It's very smooth. 1500 is great. Go back to idle. And I feel a roughness at idle. I wouldn't necessarily call this a misfire, but I definitely feel a roughness, and I definitely am seeing my misfire counter. And you can see again, it's the number 4. Now, is it possible this thing had a P0304 cylinder 4 misfire in memory? It is possible, but remember, we got this vehicle, we had no trouble codes. Everything was wiped out, which really makes our job difficult sometimes. I think it's cool though. We picked the relative compression test next. Why? Because we read a bulletin. No, sorry, first we had a suggestion from our guy here at school. I'm gonna mention his name, Dave Slatke, good guy, who worked for GM before he came here to teach. Said, hey Paul, these engines are known for mechanical problems. I'm like, cool, thanks for the tip. We go in the scan tool, we find a EBI information, experience-based information from Snap-on, same thing. So we do the relative compression test, saw the number 4 cylinder was low on compression, went under the misfire monitor, and we found number 4 is our culprit, making us very confident we're picking the right direction, that we have a mechanical problem. You know, it's kind of tough maybe initially to take that waveform right there and say, hey, look, you have a compression problem. It's only a little bit lower than the other ones, but it's enough. Scan tool is confirming that. Misfires on cylinder 4. You get cars like this in the field where somebody's been messing around, it really can cause your diagnosis to be longer because you're missing information. We didn't have this, right? Guys, when we started, and they're all trickling back in from lunch now, when we started, we had zeros across the board on all of these misfires, and now we're retaining this in memory. And it's getting worse, isn't it? We never had one that was 174 before. This is a lot worse of a misfire than what we had earlier. So how do you know that someone was here when you have no codes? If it's a Ford, what you can do is just read the codes. On a Ford, it will actually give you a P1000 code. It means someone was here. On this car, go to your generic functions. This is our OBD2 mode. Go to your readiness monitors. And what we look for is, are our readiness monitors cleared? And what we want to see is them all to say ready or complete. We don't want to see not complete. See, the catalyst says not complete. EVAP says not complete. When we started, I believe the Misfire also said not complete, didn't it? No, it was the O2. So we only had 3, right? Okay. And so when you see that, that means somebody was in here and cleared this memory. So we could have other issues with this car too. No question about it. And we talked about that with the group. So just a little tip for you guys on how do you know? Was someone here? The codes are, there's no codes, but was someone here and cleared the codes? This is standard on every car. Go to your readiness monitors. You can use a cheap scan tool to do that. That'll give you direction. All right, what I want to do now, because we've covered pretty much everything we did together. I want to redo this compression test again while we're showing, sorry, go back to the scanner first, while we're showing the misfires that we're showing. This looks worse than what it's been. Yeah, we almost have, we can look at it on here, we almost have a constant misfire now. Where before, what were we seeing? Maybe 2 and then 6 and then, you know, maybe 8 or 14. It was bouncing back and forth to 0. And I've explained this in other videos I've done with misfires. If you guys want, you can search a keyword misfire and the other videos should come up where I'm talking about these misfire counters. But for those of you that have been following, basically what you're looking at for the current is a 200 cylinder firing event and how many times it misfired over 200 cylinder firing events. And as you can see right now, it looks like it's counting up to 160 or so on that. If we graph that, we can see it better. It's misfiring 178 times out of 200. And that's why it keeps going back to 0. And then what we do with this number, once we hit 200 cylinder firing events, it will add that number over to here. So watch it one more time. We're at 2930. Watch that number, and that one at the same time, 2930. Did you see it just count up onto that? We were at 2930, and then it went to 3108. I don't want to do math live on camera. I'll screw it up. I always do. No big deal. But that's what we're looking at. Pretty bad misfire. Here's what we're going to do from here, guys, because we have the evidence to do it, no question about it. We're going to pull the number 4. We're going to do some in-cylinder pressure transducer testing and compare it to the other cylinders. And then we're potentially going to put a bore scope in with the help of Mr. Kaplan here at the school. We're going to put a bore scope in number 4, see if we can eyeball a valve seat issue, which is what we think we have on this vehicle. So that's where we're going next. I almost forgot. Before we do that, one more time, let's do our cranking compression test, see if it got any worse. Shut that off. Turn the key on first. Key's on. Pedal to the floor. Go ahead and crank it. Okay. Now it didn't look any worse to me, at least to the naked eye. I don't know if that's more pronounced or not from what it was before. I don't think so. Is that still my number 4 though? Remember, this is my number 1. Firing order 13542. So 13542. 13542. 13542, and so on. Definitely the number 4 is the one that stands out every single time. It's lower than the other ones. Do we have some other ones? It looks like it. At times, maybe. Is that the number 3? Let me count that again. Yeah, 1, 3. 3 is a little lower there. 5, 4, 2, 1, 3. It seems okay there. 5, 4, 2, 2. There's number 3 again, being low. So suggesting other cylinders if this car is known for valve seat issues. I think we're seeing that in other cylinders. So next up, in-cylinder pressure. Hopefully it'll show us something. It may not. I'm not very good at my in-cylinder pressure waveforms yet. So it might just be the borescope that says, hey, we're done. Maybe we'll do a leak down. I'm not sure direction exactly. I'm hoping the in-cylinder pressure tests give us some great waveforms. We'll do cylinder 1. You know what would be important here is maybe picking one of our high cylinders. I think cylinder 1 would be a good one to use as a comparison. I wouldn't want to use cylinder 3 or maybe this guy right here. Which one's that one? So that'd be 1, 3. Cylinder 5 would be a good comparison cylinder too. 4 and 5, they're right next to each other. 5 seems to be high all the time. 1, 3, 5, yeah. Cylinder 5 or cylinder 1. We'll compare a good cylinder to cylinder 4. Hopefully we see something in there. I don't know, we'll see where it takes us. First thing would be introduce the tool that we're using. Of course, it's the Varus, and I have to tell you guys, this is the first time I've done in-cylinder pressure testing on the Varus. I'm hoping this works out well. The adapter that I'm using, it's actually a special adapter, and there's the part number. Let's make sure we're getting that in the shot, because I know you guys are going to ask me about part numbers. And actually, I looked this up for someone the other day, and it wasn't all that expensive. I think it was around $30 or something like that for this adapter. So there's your number. And what it does is it connects to the auxiliary port and then channels 1 and 2. And then it has multiple inputs. And I believe we're not using this, so that may be a factor on the top of the tool. We're not using the auxiliary part. What we're using is, let me get the other end of this cable. I'm using a cable that plugs into this, and I'm going to go on the first port. And that cable number, of course, you guys are going to want that too. So that's the cable number, and it's just a, it's tough to get this in the shot. It's just a cable with an adapter on the end of it, 3-prong adapter that I can plug into this pressure transducer. And this is the 500 PSI transducer that I'm using. And there's your number for that guy. Of course, we want to use a 500 PSI transducer, not a 100 PSI one like this one. This is the one that came in all of our kits for the school, because cylinder pressures go a lot higher than 100 PSI. Need the 500 one. Now the rest of this, if you look at it, I've adapted this. So the transducer, when it comes to us, you know, it comes like that. The rest of the copper that you're looking at here, I just pieced that together from parts we had in our tool room. So don't ask me about where I got the rest of this. This is probably from an old compression gauge, and then the rest of this would be fittings that worked. Okay? So what we have now is the ability to read cylinder pressure. So I'm using a regular compression gauge hose, no Schrader valve in here, very important. If there is a Schrader valve in there, you need to take it out. And if you can't take the Schrader valve out, you need to use a different hose. No Schrader valve when you're doing electronic testing. And so that's going to go in the cylinder, and we'll be able to read a voltage waveform based on pressure from this transducer. Okay, I'll try not to be long-winded for this segment. I tend to be sometimes. There's a lot of information here. I'm trying to shorten this. First of all, my students went home for the day. We spent the rest of the afternoon playing around with the scope and the compression waveforms and trying to get good pictures and things like that. You can see in this shot we have cylinder 5 being looked at with this compression gauge right now, this pressure transducer. Cylinder 4 sits right next to it here. When we did these tests, we actually had number 5 coil unplugged, and we had the number 4 transducer in there. And the reason we did it this way is we wanted to have a 2-cylinder, no contribution for all of our tests. The problem when you're doing in-cylinder pressure and you're measuring idle compression pressures, if you let's say number 4 was completely dead. It was, and it was contributing, but just bear with me for a second. Let's say number 4 is dead, no contribution. When your gauge is installed here, what you have is a single cylinder misfire. When you move to a good cylinder, which would be our number 5 in this case, what you really have is a 2-cylinder misfire now, because number 4 is dead. And so, ours wasn't completely dead, but to eliminate the variable of RPM differences when we do the number 5 to the number 4, which will change your compression pressures, we disabled the number 5 when we measured the number 4, and we had the number 4 disabled when we measured the number 5. So we had a 2-cylinder misfire in both circumstances. That's one variable when doing compression testing with a scope that I've learned. You have to be at the same RPM for running compression readings to compare cylinder to cylinder. Let me take you to the scope and show you the waveforms. Okay, what I've done, first of all, is I've brought you into our picture folder. I took pictures of this because it's a lot easier for me to scroll through my different pictures for you guys than it is to go into the actual scope waveforms themselves. So I took basically JPEG images, and that's going to allow me to scroll through. So the first thing would be, let's look at our cranking compression of the number 4. This is my number 4 cranking, and we're hitting about 125 pounds of compression, or 125 PSI. And then when we compare that to the number 5, you see we're a little bit higher, we're 150. And so that confirms our relative compression test that we showed a little bit lower compression in the number 4 cylinder than we saw in the rest of them. Now we did see a few other ones. If I remember, number 3 showed us some low compression on occasion too, but number 4 was consistent. So again, comparing number 4 and number 5, just looking at the peaks up here, guys. 125 is that number right there. And we'll go to the next image. There's 150. This is my number 5 cranking. Nothing really stood out to us. We can see a little bit of differences in the characteristics at the bottom of this waveform, so I'll let you look at those for a second. This is more rounded during these expansion pockets. Whoops. And you see number 5 is more of a point. Number 4, it's a little more rounded. Number 5 is a little more of a point. I have to admit to you guys, I'm still new at doing in-cylinder pressure waveforms. Honestly, I shouldn't really say I'm new at it. I've been playing around with them for a couple years now. And I don't know, I guess what I'm saying is I'm still not very good at them. One of the things I didn't like right away when I saw this number 4 waveform is I didn't like the way that this arc looked in here. There's a lot of theory that goes into this. I'm not going to go through that with you guys right now. But I was thinking valve problem right away when I saw these towers, the compression towers, and the way that this characteristic looked. But then when I saw it on the number 5, which is a known good cylinder, they look the same. And so variables upon variables is really what the in-cylinder pressure waveforms have shown me. And I'm starting to not like them, truthfully. All right, so cranking, we see about 25 PSI difference. And then I really thought we would see something running. And this is at idle on the number 5. Again, a lot of characteristics involved here. We can see some additional stuff in here. We couldn't see cranking, and that's the intake valve opening. And we can see valves opening and closing, and cool stuff. I mean, it's a useful waveform at times, but I found in this truck that it wasn't for me. Now, somebody else that maybe knows a little bit more about these can chime in and say, hey, look at this part of the waveform, you can see, such and such. But the peaks of these compression towers, I don't have my numbers in here, and this is a frozen picture, but we're, let me take a look, that's 50, that's 75, this is 100, so in between 75 and 100, just above, maybe about 80 or 90 PSI, I think is what I remember measuring before. This is the number 5. And my number 4 is really close to that too. It's about the same, about 89 to 90 PSI at the top. So the towers look the same. The waveform itself is pretty consistent. Let me bounce you back and forth. This is number 5. That's the number 4. That's the number 5. That's the number 4. And we don't want to pay too much attention to the additional oscillations in here. The stuff that occurs in here has a lot to do with exhaust manifold design, and there's other cylinders that feed into this manifold. We get feedback. This is really our exhaust stroke in here, although as I'm bouncing, I am seeing a little bit of something going on. So that's the number 5, the quote good cylinder. That's the number 4. I don't know, basically guys, looking at this at face value, there's no way, in my opinion, that you're going to make a determination by looking at these. They look great. They look identical to me. Subtle differences, yeah, in hindsight, from what I'm about to show you, we can maybe pick these apart a little bit further, but they look pretty good. The only thing we saw was a 25 PSI difference during cranking. That's my number 4 cranking. There's my number 5 cranking. We didn't do the rest of them. We just did 4 and 5. So I didn't like where we were. However, the symptoms were, again, a misfire that I couldn't really feel. It just felt rough. And off idle, that misfire went away. So it really still put us in the direction of compression. And we stayed with that. We didn't go, in the direction of an ignition coil or an injector. If we had a problem with those, it would be more than just idle. This thing runs great off idle. Staying focused with our compression concerns, we did a leak down test with an old school gauge, and I want to show you that next. And first thing we do with this tool is we take the airline off, and pay attention to this gauge over here to the right. Connect the airline to it, and nothing's attached to it, so I have no airflow from the system right now. And what we do is we zero our gauge, and we just turn, let you see what I'm doing here, turn the dial. You see I can change the pressures there, and really I want this to be at 0 to know what kind of leakage I have. Cylinder leakage, we're suspecting a valve problem still. So put that on 0. And let me show you the number 5 first. So I'm putting a hose in. Again, there's no check valve in the end of that. We want the air to go in the cylinder. This is my number 5. And right now I have airflow because my valves are still open. I'm just taking a wrench. I'm going to the crankshaft, and I'm going to turn the crank by hand. And what I generally do is put air in the cylinder, turn the crank until you start getting resistance. And when you start getting resistance, that means the valves are closed and you're on the compression stroke. There's some people that would want to put it at true top dead center compression and then put air in the cylinder, and I just never found it necessary. A little bit hard to hold that. You can hear the airflow slowed down tremendously, and you see that my gauge, I'm all the way over here. This is 0, that's 20, that's 40. The manufacturers of this gauge say that 40% leakage, up to 40% leakage is okay. I don't have a number for you guys. I don't know what's acceptable on an engine. We're about 10% here. So if I let this go, that's with the valves open. Turn this a little bit more. Close these valves. Okay, that's my number 5. And we're going to call that one good. But let me show you the number 4. And again, I'm just using a wrench, turning it by hand on the crank. Roughly 10% leakage on that number 5. Let's make sure we are still zeroed. And it looks like we're off a little bit there on our 0, so maybe just a little bit more than 10, I'm not sure. Not a big deal. Let's compare it to the number 4. Number 4 is the one we've been worried about from the get-go. Way back when we did our cylinder relative compression test. This is my number 4. And I'm going to turn the crank again. Just turning by hand. I've actually used the ignition and bumped the key to get it close to TDC before I turn it with a wrench, but on this vehicle the computer controls the crank and it'll continue to crank as soon as I touch the key. So bumping the starter is not an option on this vehicle. Need to turn it by hand. This is my number 4. I can't even get it. This is actually worse than the last time I did this. Trying to get this to hold the most pressure here. It looks like maybe, yeah, about right there. This has gotten worse since the engine has cooled off. The last time I did this, we were up about 60% leakage, and now we are at, what is that number? Well, between 60 and 80. So we're about 70% leakage right now on that cylinder. So we have air going somewhere. We have leakage going somewhere. Let me see if I can get this to hold, and then it should hold because it's not much. All right, question is, that's actually holding on its own. I'm not even holding the wrench. Question is where is this leak? Remember what the bulletin said. Intake valve seats are known for issues. So we suspected the intake from the get-go. What you do with leakage tests like this would be you listen in 3 different places. One would be the valve cover. And if you take the oil cap off and take a listen in here, and actually what we've been taught over the years is to use a piece of rubber hose, something like this, but a lot longer, because it helps noise transfer. So you can put your ear right up to that, and you can take a listen. If you hear a lot of air coming out of here and nowhere else, then that suggests a ring problem. And so let me back up. The 3 places we listen for air would be throttle body, the intake. Number 2 would be the exhaust tailpipe, and number 3 would be the valve cover. If you don't hear much air here in the intake and the exhaust, and you hear a lot of air here, then you're talking about a ring problem. If you hear a lot of air through the throttle body, the throttle plate area, when you open the throttle plate, that's an intake valve. If you hear a lot of air from the tailpipe, it's an exhaust valve. So it's a pretty basic test. And I don't know if the camera will pick this up. I can certainly hear it. This is a drive-by-wire throttle body. Really, the gauge here doesn't matter. I'll let you see what I'm doing. We'll keep the gauge in the shot, I guess. Just going to reach in and open the throttle, let you guys take a listen. Listen. I know, you know what I'll do? Take my mic. I'm going to stop talking here for a second. I'm going to put the mic up to the throttle body. That's throttle closed. That's with the throttle open. Closed, open. I'm pretty sure that picked up. So confirmed number 4 cylinder intake valves, leak down test. The scope, the in-cylinder pressure waveforms, you know, it's cool, it's fancy, it's great. Really wasn't as helpful as the old school leak down test. This is a common issue. Really what we need to do is all of the cylinders, but is it really necessary? I mean, the head's got to come off, the seats need to be replaced, all of them. We're not just going to do the number 4. You we're going to follow the bulletin and get them all done. All right, so to finish this up, a few things. One, to get you guys what engine this is, I never mentioned it. It's a 3.7 liter engine. The build date on this vehicle is 11/07. So it's a 2008 model year Hummer H3. I've shown enough in this video to condemn a valve issue. The cylinder head has to come off. That's the next step. No question about it. What we're going to do tomorrow is we're going to put a bore scope in this and take some shots of the internals to see if we can see the issue with the scope. We may or may not be able to. If I can get some good shots for you guys, I will put a part 2 video in with those images. And then also what we'll do is any questions that you guys have here with this part 1 video, we'll address those too in part 2 along with the bore scope images. So that's the direction I want to take this. Look for a part 2 here. Not sure when that will get done. Hopefully soon, but look for it. Again, I appreciate all of your support. Hope you guys learned something from this. Please, if you have any questions, put them in here. We'll all talk about it. We all learn from each other for sure. And with any kind of luck, we'll be able to answer some of those in part 2 with some good bore scope pictures.